Hello, beautifuls, and welcome to the Gifted Table. Once again, you have come to take your seat, and I'm so grateful. I am your host, Dr. Melanie Harris, and today we are talking about one option, two options? No, the third option right here on the Gifted Table. And who but to tell us more about the third option and what it is, but the beautiful, the talented, the amazing Dr. Judy White. Welcome back to the table, Dr. White.
Thank you for having me come back again. Yes.
So excited. Now, those of you here at the table, you remember she was here last month, I believe it was a few weeks ago, talking about the Mosaic Legacy. And so we're going to talk about what Mosaic Legacy is doing with Third Option. So first of all, how is Mosaic Legacy doing? What's going on with the team? What's been happening since we last had you on the table?
Mosaic Legacy is alive and well. And we just had a meeting the other day to start planning our gala for next year. We're going to be having a breakfast this year, as well as a vision board party in January. So we're just excited. Some of our team members have been promoted on their jobs. And that was one of our goals, supporting people so that they can advance in their career. But we're doing well, and we're just glad that it's a brand new year. 22-23 is here.
I will be participating, so let me know ahead of time so I can make sure I get down there. But yes, I'm so excited. Okay, so Third Option. It was mentioned briefly during our last conversation when the board of Mosaic Legacy was on the Gifted Table. And it talked about how it's another program or platform to support students. So what is Third Option?
I was called by Dr. Paul Gatto of San Diego, and he says, Dr. White, I heard your passion in your voice, and I know you are all about racial healing. I know a person that has written a book called The Third Option, and I want to introduce you to him. So the third option is built on this premise that people want to take one side or the other, and that if I'm either for you or I'm against you, that the whole country has become divisive, and we don't have to take sides. There is a third option. And the third option really is honoring each other as human beings. And that when we see each other as human beings, then we're more likely to go to that place of racial healing. We're more likely to have a space where there's not fighting and discrimination. So there are 6 steps to the third option, but that's where I got the introduction. And Miles McPherson, he's actually a retired NFL player, and he's a pastor of one of the most integrated churches in the state of California, The Rock in San Diego. I think they've got over 30,000 members.
Wow.
But if you look at the congregation, there's no majority. It is totally integrated. So they're living out what they're saying should be.
I love it. So how does that relate to what your vision was and that one thing you were looking for Mosaic Legacy? How did you bridge that gap?
I bridged the gap because you can tell people where you want to go, but it is so much better when you tell them, and this is how to do it. So I want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about the 6 lessons or modules that are developed, because this is where you start people at and then move them along. So there's a first module that's called Similarity, Racism, and Honor. And in that part of Similarity, you talk about we are more similar than different. The programs that work on DEI, they start with diversity, but we start with similarity because we all live in a world, we all breathe air, we have blood running through our veins. We all want to have a home, shelter, we want our families to be successful. So we talk about similarities, and then we remind people scientifically, we're 99.5% alike. And so we know that there's culture difference, but we're talking about the anatomy of the body, the human being, right. And we are more similar. And so when people start valuing each other as a human being, then if you're valuing somebody and honoring them, you're not going to have time to be fighting them or seeing them different or lower than you. One of the things that Miles McFiction says in his book is that when you look at racism, it means that you are putting somebody down. And in order for you to think that they're less than you, you're not seeing them as an equal human being. And that's why it starts off with similarities.
I love that. And I can't imagine just the activities that's surrounded about similarities. I mean, what are some things that you have discovered that has been the most impactful people with Module 1 on looking at the similarities?
Well, the difference with the third option is not only about professional development for the adults. We have actually developed a professional development for student curricula because we believe that students have to be taught. So I'm going to give you one quick example of similarity from a student's perspective. The teacher would say to the students, bring your favorite cup to school, bring your favorite cup. And then, of course, this teacher would have extra cups if someone wasn't able to bring one, but they have to always have a choice. So once all the children get the cups, then she or he might say, okay, what do you like about that cup? And some child might say, oh, I like this cup because my Nana gave it to me. Or I like this cup because my favorite color is green. I like this cup because it came from Disneyland as a souvenir. And then they talk about the exterior of the cup. Mm-hmm. And then the next step, she would say, okay, I'm pouring water into all of your cups. Now, tell me how the difference of the cups of what I put in. And then the kids start saying, well, it's all the same. You poured water from the same container in all of our cups.
How about that?
Yeah. And then they make the transition, and that's how we are as human beings. We might have come from different places. We might have memories from different spaces, but inside we're the same. And that particular example has resonated with the little people. So there are at least four activities in every module for every grade level span in the curriculum.
I bet that's just so engaging for the students. I can't imagine if you actually did that with adults as well.
Yeah, you could.
Right, with so many who are like coffee drinkers or tea drinkers, or whatever it is. And it's funny because just recently, and in my organization, I was talking to a colleague, actually it was a group of us, and one of the colleagues revealed that he has a mug for every day of the week. And he has his weekend cups, and his wife and his family knows that these cups right here are only for the weekend. These cups right here are Monday through Friday. So it will be interesting to see, but you're still filling a cup with the same thing.
It's how we are the same inside. But there are cues that we have in our world. But and even in the deeper parts of the conversation of similarity, we talk about racism. How did you find out about race? Who first told you about racism, and what did they say? And so then that gets to be very interesting, especially when people are transparent and there's a sense of trust. So it's important that we develop trust with everybody because we're taking them on a journey.
And are people open to sharing their experiences?
It takes a minute. Mm-hmm. It takes a minute. And then as a facilitator, I have been blessed with so many different stories in life that I'm able to share some stories, and then it kind of breaks the crowd up a little bit. And one great thing about the third option, professional development and curriculum, Miles McPherson actually did a video to open it up every lesson. So every lesson you start with the video, and then he's very transparent. He's very engaging. And then once he sets the goals for that particular module, then people kind of move into it.
Okay, so that was module 1, similarities. What are the other modules?
Groups is the second module, how we are actually born into groups. We're born into groups, and also there are groups that we choose. Like we are born into certain cultures as a group. We're born into families that like to sing. We have a tendency to be in groups. And then when you're in a group, somehow in the social narrative of that, you tend to favor the group that you're born in. And you tend to have biases towards the other groups. So that's where we start getting into the racial healing parts. How did these form, and what are you doing? What can you change in your life when you're looking at the groups? What are you going to do to try to start inviting the out group into your in group and paying attention to people around you on your job, or if in a classroom, are there certain students that appear to be in the out group? what can you do in encouraging your students to get them in the in-group? I pay attention when I go to events. And if I see somebody kind of standing by themselves and it looks like they don't know a lot of people there, even if I don't know a lot of people there, I'll go up to them. I say, tonight's your night. And they look at me and say, what? I said, yeah, I decided I'm going to meet somebody I didn't know at every meeting I go to, and you're the one. So tell me about yourself. And so I just do that as an intro. They know me, even if they don't know anybody else in the group. But I have met some wonderful people in that way. But that means you're trying to take that person that might be in the out group into the in group. Because most of the meetings I'm going to, I'm either part of the group or I'm invited as a speaker or something. But that's been a strategy for me.
How does that transfer over into someone's leadership?
You have to pay attention, because when I was working with unions, one of the main things they would say that it seemed like principals had their favorite teachers. So they felt like there was this in-group that principals had, and that principals didn't even know it was perceived, but it was very obvious to somebody looking on. And sometimes it's because you might have the same number of children, or you came from the same place. So it's raising that level of awareness of how you form groups and how you might be biased toward a group, and then shifting it in your mind and in your actions. When you really care about people, you care about how they feel, and you start wanting everybody to feel like they belong. And that's where the inclusion piece comes. Do you really feel like this is another human being, and if you see that they're uncomfortable or they're on the outside, what will you do to change that? And so that shifts right into the third level, which is labels. And what happens, so we talk about similarities, we talk about groups and how they're formed and the biases and our prejudices sometimes. And then we get to labels, how we actually label people. We label people.
Yes, we do.
And when you label them, they can't live beyond that label. And so what you want to do is you want to be in touch with what we call dishonoring labels and honoring labels. Because the dishonoring labels that you call people that are not a positive, you put other characteristics with that. And so in the training, we actually practice what are some names and labels you give kids and adults, and how have you limited them, and what could be an honoring label to switch that to. And so that part is really, really powerful as well.
Dishonoring. What has been some of the common dishonoring labels that have come up in some of your sessions?
I have asked the participants, be transparent with me. Talk to me about dishonoring labels that have been put on you. Some lazy. They think that people put their whole culture as lazy. Others, they've used the N-word, that's a dishonoring label. And they have actually brought that up in a training as well. Or stupid, or saying they're inferior. And you've labeled them as inferior. And so those are some of the things that they say. But we also ask them to look at, when have you labeled a group or individual, and especially when it comes to students, by blinking and what do you see and that you take into your optics that label them, and then how we have to give them an honoring label. Yes.
I love that you asked the question, when have you dishonored? And then how can you flip that to an honoring label? I actually have that topic that I want to cover here on the Gifted Table about labels, because I just remember sharing with a friend not too long ago, labels are for clothes and items.
Yes.
It should not be for people. We should not have to label, but we do. It's part of our human nature. Sometimes it's part of our environment. It's even part of how we grew up, because we heard it. So we just adopted it, and now we say it, and it begins to become something that's generationally done, and you don't even catch it because everybody's doing, that's all I know, or that's how I grew up. But when you talk about how it's dishonoring to someone, and I would even say to those, we mentioned, some of the negative dishonoring, like lazy and, you're not smart, you're stupid. But what about how people may feel dishonor certain groups when they're considered, oh, no, they're always smart, or no, they're the mathematicians, or, this, that, and the other, where someone may see it as a positive, but it's really not. It's still showing your bias towards a group and putting people in a box, right, that they may not even fit just because this is, oh no, they are all like that. It can be on both extremes. Would you agree?
I agree. And that's what you get into generalizations, and people don't want to be put into groups, especially even male and female groups. They don't want to be generalized. And we had a very diverse group in one of our trainings, and our Asian brothers and sisters, they did speak up very eloquently about how they feel they've been labeled, not only about their intellect and those expectations, but it's just about who they are as human beings. And that's why the whole third option premise is that we honor each other as human beings. Blind spots actually come after groups, because we do have blind spots when it comes to people, and that we don't see them, but also we don't see how we hurt people. And sometimes we do things and say things that hurt people. We were working with a group, their board member spoke to the assistant superintendent, who was Latino, and said, just think you're an assistant superintendent. You didn't think you would be that way when you was swimming across the ocean or something, like, or climbing a wall.
Oh,
even though that was very, very offensive, and he thought it was funny or something.
I'm looking for my pearls to clutch.
That particular individual had been born in America and didn't even associate with immigration in terms of that he had to do something like that. And he did not receive that as a compliment. And then the person who has said it, they thought that they could joke about it. So that is considered a blind spot, when you think you can joke about something that is offensive. And then when we delve into blind spots in the training, we say that it's also a revelation of a gap of what you don't know. And that one was very, very blatant. But there are other things that people say all the time, and it's a blind spot.
If we connect that to simply driving, right? When you're thinking about your peripheral vision, and then you have these mirrors on the side, and sometimes even when you're signaling to get over, when you need to change a lane, you're still supposed to look over your shoulder to make sure that no one else is in your way. But when we neglect to do that extra check, that real blind spot, take a look. Who do you see on the side of you? Who is that person? Do you even see them approaching? Do you even see them
approaching? That's such a good analogy, because it's paying attention to people around you. Yeah. And so in this blind spot module, we talk about how the blind spots have been built, which is similar to the labels that you've heard it, and then you start seeing it, and you're taking things for granted, as opposed to looking at the faces of the people you serve and seeing. But we also talk about how to minimize the blind spots. What are some of the things that you can minimize blind spots? And the only way really is getting to know people. Because when you get to know people, all it takes is one person. Like, I'll give you an example. I don't know how many times in my life, probably you, a lot of other African Americans who might have been successful, people might say, I never met anybody like you. All that meant is that they had this blind spot, these labels, these groups in their head, and then you defied what they said, what they thought.
Oh, well, I could give you a bunch of them.
You're the exception. We're not necessarily the exception. We're the exception in their world.
Yeah.
But we're not the exception in life as it is.
And I got to tell you, Dr. White, some of the ones that really stand out for me that I've heard, you're so articulate. What am I supposed to be?
Yes.
Right. And then even outside of that, one I heard so much growing up, oh, you're pretty to be dark, as if dark-skinned people can't be pretty. Dark-skinned girls can't be attractive. Dark-skinned girls have no beauty. Oh, you're pretty to be dark.
Yeah.
As it's one of those backhanded compliments that people give you. But people don't realize that's the blind spot. And to be honest, many of the times I had to kind of express how that affects me is when I'm talking to other African Americans, especially those who are more of a lighter persuasion, and they're like, oh, no, that was a compliment. And then I have to explain to them why. I've never said, you know what, you are really pretty to be light skinned.
Can you imagine turning that around though? Yeah.
But, just those things, Your
And that's what awareness is so important. But then my whole thing is that we're only as good as our follow through. So you can't just go through any type of training and say, now that I'm aware, if you're not going to do things differently, why did you even go through the training? And so this particular training, I see it as foundational. I've been through a lot of training. I taught culture proficiency at the Azusa Pacific for a decade, and everything has its place. But until you can look at people and say, hey, you know what? I see you as a human being. All that other stuff, you're not going to get there. You can say you're going to change policies, but if you don't see them as human beings and of equal stature, then you're still going to justify within your flesh that they're inferior or that they deserve not to be given the same opportunities. Yeah.
And then we're thinking about how this affects children, young adults, people that are students in high school, middle school, elementary, their parents, their guardians, for those of us who are in education, because that is the community we serve, that those are the customers who we serve, and if we're having these issues as colleagues, with one another professionally, I can't imagine the conversations that are said about those who we serve.
The fifth, which is next to the last one, which is the brothers and sisters keeper. Okay. And some people, even when I've done the training, they said, do we have to use that term, brothers and sisters keeper? Can we use peer keeper? Can we use, I said, you can use whatever you want, but just make sure you do what it's saying. and that's it's more of an accountability partner.
Yeah.
And so with the brothers and sisters keeper, the whole concept was to say, okay, what if people are not living out this journey of racial healing and they are offending and they are labeling and having blind spots? How do you keep them accountable? So this particular chapter, or module rather, it teaches people what to say, how to interrupt racism very respectfully, but get the point across. So there's like a list of different things you can say. Say, that hasn't been my experience. Oh, well, what causes you to feel that way? That you push people a little bit when you find that they say something that's offensive, or you tell them some things that are true, so that they can to make them think. So there's a lot of questions, and then in the modules, I usually ask the participants to come up with more. We might have 10 and that's in the module. What are some other things that we can say and do? And we get there by saying, even at our tables at home, around with our family, when they say something, our response usually is to go silent. Don't say anything about it if we don't agree, or we do this and that, and why that doesn't help, and that you have to break it. But it's not about making enemies in your family or with your coworkers. It's awareness. And one thing that Miles says all the time is win the relationship, not the argument.
I love that.
Win the relationship. So when you're trying to win the relationship, you're thinking, how's this person going to respond to me, helping them? What are strategic words that I can choose and be intentional about helping them get to another place? But a lot of things have been brought out in people these last couple of years during the pandemic, and things that we never thought would come out, but it was in them. So we have to deal with that.
And it seems like this module really looks into micro and macro aggressions.
It does. And it just and we always say, we're on a journey together. And if anybody says something that offends you or makes you feel bad, you're supposed to raise up your hand and say family, because we believe if we're all similar and we've all been created the same way, then we are family. Yeah. And if you look at DNA stuff, we're all family. So we do that. And I think only twice out of maybe 12 trainings did somebody say family. And it was because there was a person who had been offended by a police officer who was making some comments that were true to their experience. And then there was a wife of a police officer who had suffered some other things in a different kind of way. And so we had to do a family time for that one. So our last one is race consultations. We are used to having conversations about race, but not consultations about race. And when we talk about race consultations, we're talking about how we can come together and get to know somebody. We have a homework assignments where you're supposed to go into an environment where you're one of few. Like say, if you're white, you go to a black church, or you're black, go to a white church, or you can go to a different type of meeting. but we want you to see how it feels to be in that environment, and then getting to know people. So with this race consultations, you're supposed to try to find somebody that you can get to know at a deeper level, that you will just seek out, and that you guys become partners for a while and do some things together and find out. And then it's also to practice just saying hello to people, is people that you don't normally speak to. Because I started, after I did the training, I started watching, and I noticed that in the stories, white people speak to white people, black people speak to black people, but you didn't see a lot of cross hellos. Mm-hmm. And so just saying hello, being optimistic, and just honoring them as human being, and finding out more than just their name. What do they like to do? And I know that during the pandemic, we had the mask going on, and people still don't want to talk. But we got to say, when it's safe to do so, we got to get out and start doing again. But honoring each other, and the only way you can honor other races and cultures, you have to get to know them.
So I'm really curious about this portion, this last module. But have you come across, for instance, maybe someone, like maybe it was someone who's Caucasian, but maybe they grew up more in an urban area, right? So on the outside, they may, seem similar. But when you talk to them, they might connect more with African Americans or Latinos, because that was their environment. Have you seen any of that type of cross cultural accountability partners?
Absolutely. I've seen so much. Mm-hmm. And I love it, because sometimes, even as a facilitator, you don't want to prejudge and say, well, this person's skin is a certain color, so that's all they know. Mm-hmm. And when we get to the groups, many of brothers and sisters of different races, they start talking about how they relate more to one group than another because of their upbringing. And then they'll give examples, or because they relate to that group, but they look like another group, the other group might disclose true feelings. And they're like, you don't even know me. I'm with these people or that. And so, or even some of my Black and white brothers and sisters might be bilingual. And then people might say something about a Spanish speaker, and they're like, I speak Spanish, so it's really revealing. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, my goal is to say, will you commit to racial healing? Will you be part of the journey? Like I said, I'm trying to start a movement. Right. Because I'm finding that there's no being still. There's no just being still. You're either moving in one direction or another. And we have to be the ones that are moving in the direction of unity and peace and love and honoring each other and knowing that we're all people. We're just all people.
What has been one of the most impactful moments during your consultation with groups so far?
So I was hired to do a listening tour. And prior to going into one of these meetings, I was told that there was going to be a lot of opposition. People were on certain party lines, and they have a certain belief system. So, I pray like I always do. And the Lord just kept saying, listen. So I go into the meeting, and I'm just as calm, and people are talking, and they're throwing things, at me in terms of comments and stuff. And I'm just taking it out. Nothing negative about me, but the listening tours about the district. At one point, this man was just saying what he thought. And I said, you know what? I hear you. I get it from your perspective. I said, I don't agree with it. And I showed him a water bottle. I said, you see, what do you see? And he said he saw, something water. I said, well, I see the label, what's in it. I said, which one of us are wrong? Neither one of us. We're just looking at it at a different angle. So that's my experience. I said, but I'm here just to listen. So at the end, he came up to me and he said, can I shake your hand? He said, I have never had anybody just listen to me the way you did. So I listened, I paraphrased. I said, I get it. Oh, I'm not sure. I'm following you all the way on this side. But so I respected him. And he said that most of the time when he speaks, everybody just cuts him off and they don't hear what he's trying to say. So that's been a challenge, but that also was an affirmation to me. People want to be heard. And he had a good point about some things. And I can say, oh, shoot, if I was looking at it from that angle, I'd be mad too.
And that's so crucial. People they just They just want to be heard. Now, you mentioned districts. Outside of school districts, are you working with any other type of profession, any other types of organizations so far, or do you plan to?
I've been called to work with groups, and even the charter school world, they have been very, very gracious. I've worked with faith-based groups. I've worked with a couple of boards of nonprofits, to be able to take them through the training and to see, do you want to do the deeper one? Because we have an overview. We also have personal development where people would be able to just take classes online without having it being facilitated by a person. But at the end of the day, all of us have to be saying, we're not going to settle for division. Okay. We're going to choose the third option, which is unity and valuing each other as human beings. Yes.
So the third option is creating a community of unity, which what we're all about here at the Gifted
Table. That's what the Gifted Table is about. And you guys, I believe it's achievable. Yeah. I believe it's achievable. And that's what's going to be my legacy, that I was mosaic, multicultural, but I also was going to every day. And some days it's hard because things happen. Some people are mean, and I can just look at them. I know how they're looking at me, how they're thinking. And then I'll smile, and then I'll say, they're still a human being, and then that's just the way it is.
They're still a human being. Mm-hmm. So now looking back, seeing that, what you've been doing, you've been trained, you're certified, you've worked with some groups. What are some things you would tell yourself now as you prepare to work with different organizations and maybe even, doing more with students? Looking back from your training and where you want to move ahead to, what's something you would tell yourself to prepare for your future?
I think I would have waited to become trained and spent more time in Mosaic the first year. Because what happens, you're just one human being. You can only do so much. So being called over and over again to do the presentations, then you end up not focusing on your nonprofit. You're just helping other people. And so that's what I would tell myself to do differently. What I would do differently, too, is I would really focus on my book called We. Because in the book of We, what I did is I took Miles McPherson's 6 pillars and tenets, and then I wrote a poem about how we have to unite. And I used the preamble, we the people of the United States, as the overarching part.
Oh, wow.
And then I put a tenet under each one. When I say we the people, I went through Similarity. Dr. Angel Mexico, she was Teacher of the Year for the state of California several years back, but she actually illustrated it for me. And I just told her what my vision was. And we just took the preamble and all the tenets and we made a poem to go with it and just went through the tenets and the preamble together in alignment, and she drew pictures to go with it. So I want to promote We. You can buy it on Amazon. Different teachers have used it for discussions. In the back of the book, it gives you discussion points, but it helps you to be able to actually cover those tenets in a student format using the book.
I am so proud of you and congratulations for publishing this book because this is not your first book you've published. You've been a published author with your daughter. You guys did a book of poetry before. So is this your second or third?
Yeah, it's my third. Yes.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. She's such a gifted poet.
Oh,
so gifted. All right. So we talked about looking back and what you would do. Now looking ahead, what is it that you want? And what is it that you need so that third option could be even more powerful and impactful for the communities that you're serving?
I just want people to be aware of it. And I want them to ask their administrators, have they heard of it? So when I look at the evaluations from the third option training, teachers are saying, counselors are saying, finally, something that invites me in and that puts me on the defense or makes me so sad that I don't know that it's not impossible, that it's possible to accomplish these things. And when I ask them for one word to describe the training, 95% of the time, the one word is hopeful. Yes.
Hopeful. And after coming back after 15 months of distance learning and having a difficult year transitioning for a lot of educators last year, everyone needs to have hope.
Yes.
We all need some hope. Wow. Well, I am always so proud and always so inspired with you. As you know, you're one of my mentors, and I just appreciate you so much. Where can people contact you, or how do people get in contact with you or Mosaic if they want to participate with Third Option?
They can go online to Mosaic Legacy if they just want to communicate with me. But the Third Option has a website, and I really would encourage people to go to the Third Option website and then look at some of the videos. There's some videos up there. There's some sample lessons if people want to get into the curriculum, sample lessons. But if you went to Mosaic Legacy, there's a space for comments. You can write down whatever you want, and then we will respond. Okay.
Awesome. And where can they purchase the book? You said it's on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. They can just go to Amazon, type in We by Judy, Dr. Judy White, and it'll come up and it'll be at your doorstep.
Well, and it will also be in the description down below. So guys, get We for yourself, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your colleagues. Get We. We'll have all the information below in the description under this video. And I just want to thank Dr. Judy D. White for pulling up close and taking her seat once again at the gifted table. It won't be the last time, people. I have something else I want her to do. But I'm so grateful that everyone else was here as well. Thank you for taking your seat here at the gifted table. And remember, share this conversation. I know she gave you not nuggets because they so tiny. She gave you some big boulders today. So we're going to take those boulders and spread the word. Share this, like this video, and don't forget to subscribe. And as always, stay grounded, innovative, fierce, transparent every day. In other words, stay gifted, everyone. I'll see you next time.